This lesson begins the book of First Chronicles. It is a history of the people of Israel, as was our study of First and Second Samuel and First and Second Kings, which rightfully are called the Book of Kings. The difference, Chronicles 1 and 2 will tell the history from God's point of view. The book in the Hebrew language is Davrei Hayamin, or Words of the Day. In the Greek, it is Chronica, or Things That Matter, and in Latin, Chronica, as in chronology. It does not mirror the books of Samuel or Kings. For example, the Passover that King Hezekiah hosted was covered in 3 verses in Kings, but in Chronicles it gets 3 whole chapters. The genealogy in these first 9 chapters goes all the way to Matthew 1. As I said, these first 9 chapters are genealogy. It's quite boring to read so-and-so begat so-and-so. I will summarize these 9 chapters, pointing out important detail. It is important, the genealogy, because it traces the lineage of Jesus and gives us the key of David, which unlocks Scripture. Chapter 1 starts with Adam in Genesis, that's Adam in the garden, and leads to Jesus. Chapter 1, the first verse and the first verse of 9 give the genealogy up to the Babylonian captivity. Chapter 9, verses 22 through 44 gives the genealogy after the captivity. Now, the early part of it, the book covers the house of Israel and Judah, and it occurs before the north-south split under Solomon's son Rehoboam. But the book of Judah takes center stage, and the part after the captivity, of course, centers on Judah, as the 10 tribes to the north had been carried away by the Assyrians some over probably about 270 years earlier. I'm going to read just 5 verses in this entire 9 chapters. I am going to read, if you have your Bible, chapter 1, verse 1 through 4. Adam, she hath Enosh. She hath is Seth, and Enoch is Enos. Kenan, that is Canaan. Mahalalel, Jared, 3. Enoch, Methuselah, Lamech, verse 4. Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. So we have covered there in 4 verses all the way from Adam to Noah. And of course, some of these persons lived many long years. Methuselah, for example, almost 1,000. Some of the genealogy is given as direct lineage, that would be father, son, father, son. Some of it is what we call collateral lineage, and it would include brothers and uncles, maybe grandsons. Now, summarizing verses 5 through 7, chapter 1 covers Japheth, son of Noah. 8 through 16, the sons of Ham. Ham was cursed, not by Noah, but not by God, but by Noah, because he uncovered his father's nakedness. This is unfortunately very frequently mistaught to mean that he saw his father naked. It doesn't mean that at all. Uncovering father's nakedness in the Hebrew is a Hebrewism, and it means to lie with your father's wife. In this case, it was Ham's own mother. Canaan, Canaan, was the offspring of that act, and he was sent away by Noah. Early teachers taught that this mark on Ham was the beginning of the black race. That's untrue, and it's biologically impossible. Two persons of the same race cannot produce a person of the other race. And this teaching is an unfortunate slam on the black race. That is not how the black race came about. They were created along with all other races, and all races are loved by God, and none are favorites. The Israelites were God's chosen people, not his favorites, but chosen to bring forth the Messiah. Verses 17 through 23 of chapter 1 cover Shem. Luke 3:36 lists him as an ancestor of Jesus. Verses 24 through 27 traces the direct lineage of Shem to Abraham, covering a period from 2446 BC to 1996 BC. 28, that verse is a collateral as it lists Isaac's sons. Isaac, the son of Abraham by his wife Sarah, and Ishmael, the son of Abraham and Sarah's maid Hagar, who was an Egyptian. They were sent out, and Ishmael's ancestors became the prince of Arabian princes. 32 and 33 lists the descendants of Abraham and his second wife, who was Keturah. None of these sons inherited, of course, any of the promised land. All of that went to the descendants of Sarah and Abraham. Verse 34 gives direct lineage from Abraham to Jacob. And here he is called Israel, renamed by God. His name Jacob meant supplanter. 35 through 42 cover the lineage of Esau. 43 through 50, the kings of Edom. And 51 through 54, the princes of Edom. Edom being the red nation, the land of Esau. Chapter 2 gives the genealogy of the 12 sons of Jacob, who became the patriarchs of the 12 tribes. 3 through 12, the direct lineage from Jacob to Jesse, the father of David, and of course the ancestor of Jesus. It covers from 1836 through 1050 BC. Chapters 2, 3, and 4, the house of Judah is extensively reported. In contrast, the Naphtali family gets one verse, and the houses of Dan and Zebulun are not mentioned at all. One of the reasons Judah has so much emphasis is that Jesus is a descendant of Judah. In 13 through 54 traces Jesse and Caleb. Now, this is not Caleb the spy, but he's the son of Hezron, who would have been a grandson of Judah. Verse 15 mentions David the seventh. This is not David the king, as he is numbered the eighth son. This verse implies that a brother also named David, born before David the eighth son had died. 25 through 41 of chapter 2 covers the family of Hezron, who was the grandson of Judah, and 50 through 54 his sons. Now we are going to go to chapter 2, verse 55. It's important that we read that. Chapter 2, verse 55. And it reads, "And the families of the scribes which dwelt at Jabez, the Terathites, the Shemelethites, and Succothalites, these are the Kenites that came of Hemath, the father of the house of Rechab." Now, these are those Kenites, the sons of Cain, who wormed their way into working in the camp, as starting out as chopping wood and hauling water, and by the end of this part where it's reported here, they have squeaked in and they're scribing. They are writing the history, and they have put in their genealogy. They have slipped themselves in to the house of Judah. They are some later editions of Strong tried to list this Kenite as some Oriental tribe, that is likely a Kenite who has messed with the translation and the revision of Strong's work. Chapter 3 gives the genealogy of Judah. Verse 5 lists Nathan, and that is the ancestor of Jesus, and we learned that in Luke 3:31. Luke's genealogy reported in that book is that of Mary. Joseph's genealogy is reported in Matthew. Now, it is called Joseph's genealogy according to law, but it is not Joseph's genealogy. According to law means in-law, and it was Mary's genealogy. Verses 10 through 16 give us the king line. Her father descended from David to the last king of Judah, who was Zedekiah, and that covers from 990 BC to 509 BC. 17 through 24 covers Jehoiachin, as he was renamed by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, at the very end of 2 Kings. Chapter 4 is a direct line of Judah. Sons of Judah, only one, Perez, is direct, and all the others here are grandsons, great, maybe great. So it is called a collateral. 5 through 8 lists Asher. This is a son of Judah, and not the tribe of Judah, of Asher. In chapter 2, verse 24, we learn that he was born after Hezron had died. 9 through 10 covers Jabez, and his famous prayer is in verse 10. O Lord, expand my coast. There have been a recent book written about the prayer. 11 through 20 gives the lineage of Caleb, who was the son of Hur. 21 through 23, offspring of Selah in a direct line. There's no rhyme or reason as to how the lineage here is ordered. Perhaps it is geographic, because Simeon is next, and he would have been a neighbor of Judah, rounding out chapter 2 with verses 24 through 43. Chapter 4. Chapter 5 covers Reuben, who was the firstborn of Jacob, and he defiled his father's bed by lying with his father's concubine, and thus lost his birthright. We learn that in Genesis 35, verse 20. 1 through 10 takes us up to the captivity. 11 through 17 concern Gad and the half-tribe of Manasseh and Ephraim. Manasseh and Ephraim, of course, are offspring of Joseph. They were told by God not to fight the Moabites and the Ammonites, as they were descendants of Lot by an incestuous relationship with his daughters. However, these Moabites and Ammonites attacked, and God allowed them to take that land on the east side of the Jordan. And these three tribes, since it was a fertile and good land, asked to be settled there, and God did allow it. They secured places for wives and animals and children, and they crossed over to help the others against the Canaanites, and that is the persons that God told them to totally defeat. But they did not complete the job, of course, and that fact created troubles for them throughout the ages. Chapter 5, 18 through 26 covers these three tribes. That would be Gad, half Manasseh, and Ephraim. Chapter 6 gives much space to the tribe of Levi, and we wonder why, covering Aaron, who was the very first high priest. And we learn that his two sons, you remember back in earlier books, they let their censers go out, and they filled them with strange fire, likely started with dried dung, and went into the tabernacle to light the candlesticks, and God struck them dead. Then the two remaining sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, took the place of these two. 16 through 48, these are sons of Levi. Now, not all Levites are priests, but all priests are Levites. Others in the tribe of Levi had jobs. Gershon and Merari moved the tents and set up the tabernacle. They took it down, they moved it. The Kohathites moved the ark. The ark had rings, and they slipped poles beneath those rings, and that ark was carried on their shoulders. And if you remember, another point of it being told from the standpoint of man, when David sent to get the ark at that where the Philistines had let it come, and they took a new cart and they put it on, and it was the wrong way to move the ark. A person touched it and died. And they read the scriptures, and the second try they did it the correct way and got it to Jerusalem. Verses 49 through 53 cover Aaron and Eleazar. 54 through 81 discusses the refuge cities. Now the priests needed a place to live, and they occupied refuge cities. And a person who may have accidentally killed a person and needed to avoid the retribution of that person's relatives might go into one of these cities of refuge for protection. There were 3 of these on the east side of the Jordan and 3 on the west. We know from Luke that Mary's mother was a Levite, as she was a first cousin to Elizabeth, the wife of a high priest, the high priest Zechariah, and he was serving one of those courses. His course was that of Abiah. A high priest had to marry a Levite. So if her father was from the house of Judah, then her mother was a Levite. And thus Mary's genealogy combines the king line and the priest line in Jesus. Chapter 7, verses 1 through 5 discuss Issachar. Only one verse, 13, discusses the genealogy of Naphtali. It is likely thought by some scholars that the genealogy was not kept during the captivity, and the scribing was not up to date, nor were persons included. 6 through 10 covers Benjamin, and it's the most complete other than Levi in this part of the chapters. And it goes all the way to Saul, who was the first king, and of course the Apostle Paul declares himself to be from the tribe of Benjamin. 30 through 40, completing that chapter, is the genealogy of Asher. Chapter 8, from 1 through 32, takes it from Benjamin out to Saul, and the rest of the chapter is devoted to Saul's son. Once again, Dan and Zebulun are totally left out. The last chapter, chapter 9, I would read verse 1. Chapter 9, verse 1. So all Israel reckoned by genealogies, and behold, they were written in the book of the kings of Israel, and Judah, who was carried away to Babylon for their transgression. And that word transgression in the Hebrew means left God, and that is exactly what they did. So verses 2 through 44 of this chapter are before the captivity, and I would remind you that the word Babylon means confusion. Now, the king of Persia conquered Babylon, and it was Cyrus, the king of Persia, who allowed them to go back and to build the temple and the city walls, and to even allowed them to take some of those utensils that were hauled away that belonged in the temple for worship. The person Zerubbabel in this chapter, that name means born in Babylon. And Joshua, now this is not the one who led them in many centuries before, and the prophet Nehemiah and Ezra were to lead them back into the promised land. This spans 54 years from 454 BC to 400 BC. 10 through 13 of this chapter 9 covers the priests, and 14 through 34 the Levites. Ezra, in his book Ezra 8:15, asked the group he mustered, well, how many of you priests or Levites? There were none. All of the priests who were going back were Nethinim, and that word means given. In other words, they were acting as priests because the Levites had neglected their duty. These Nethinim were originally given to the priests to do manual labor, but unfortunately the Levite priests let them take over. These last verses, 35 through 44, Saul's genealogy is repeated once again. In the next lesson, we will pick up the book of Chronicles as it begins with chapter 10 after this genealogy has been related. This video has been an outreach of the Essex Methodist Church in Essex, Missouri, and the Crossroads Global Methodist Church in Dexter, Missouri.